Hi, everyone, and welcome to the End of Life Journey and Beyond, the Sands of Time. I'm Lisa Strahs-Lorenc, and I'm a bereavement specialist. Hi, Susan.
Hi, Lisa. So nice to see you this week. I'm Susan Capurso, End of Life Doula, and we're here to talk about a similar topic, right? We talk about a lot about death and dying, but they're important, valuable educational pieces. And today we're talking a little bit about why do other countries do death and dying so differently um, than the United States. And really, Lisa and I've been learning about this slowly over the years, but we came to some kind of ideas, and we wanted to tell you a little bit about those. So, Lisa, start us off with your thoughts on how other countries are doing it differently and why.
I'm going to start out with my own personal thing since I had so many people die in my life. Each of them being my parents and my husband. Each of them, of course, have a funeral, and that's a gathering place for everyone to celebrate the life of the person. And I chose each time to do a eulogy because that was important to me. And I remember the remarks at my husband's memorial service since he was cremated. And the remarks as they left said to me, this felt not like a funeral and not like a memorial service, but a celebration of his life. And I said, thank you so much. That's exactly what I wanted. And we have pictures around and stories, and people got up and said funny things about him. And to me, that's really the way it should be. And I started thinking about like what we do here in the United States. And of course, people have different rituals. But I started thinking about like what's happening here. And I know that the purpose of all these rituals is to bring people together as a community. Um, but like what's going on in the United States, it seems to me that these rituals, many of them are like non-existent. There's like this isolation of death. Like they called it a privatization of death. And I thought, well, what does that mean? And I went back through some readings and I found out that the plague actually changed death rituals. And in the Western culture, we're actually obsessed with living and not dying. So as technology and medicine got better, we kept preserving life more and more, and we don't want to die. It's all about, age reducing, potions, fountain of youth, how long can we live? Um, Very obsessed with it. And that's a
Makes a lot of
problem.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. So there's got to be other ways to celebrate people's lives and to come to terms with death. And so that's what we're exploring today. And I want to hand it back over to Susan because I understand that you did some good research on Ireland. So I want to learn more about that.
And it wasn't just research for this video. I had read a book. I believe the title of it is My Father's Wake, and it's about a gentleman who goes back to Ireland for his father's wake, and he couldn't believe how the townspeople came together, and it was really a touching story. And he wondered, why don't people do this in the United States where he lives, his now home? And it was very interesting to me, and it always stuck with me. So, in doing the research, I wanted to tap into Ireland a little bit because the book really resonated with me. So, I've heard through the years, as you have as well, that Irish people tend to do a great funeral. And it's about more than saying goodbye to a loved one. It becomes a great social ritual. It even ranks higher than marriages and baptisms,
Wow.
unbelievably. And that's not the case here, as we know.
Yes.
So, I know that the 2 hour wake that we're invited to here in the United States, it doesn't really promote healing, and it doesn't promote the closure that we need. And we think that it does until the weeks or the days and the months later they're upon us. And we're still feeling the overwhelming fear, even of the 2 hour wake, but we're feeling the grief that just doesn't lift. The grief doesn't lift like it could. So I'm feeling that this has partially to do with that 2-hour ceremony that we have here in the United States. So, you know, Lisa and I are big on life celebrations. We help people with life celebrations. And sometimes they don't realize that they even want a life celebration until after the person dies, right?
Yes.
And imagine if everyone did this before their loved one dies, and it was a natural process, something that we all do, like the engagement party or the bridal shower party, right? We do an end of life celebration.
So I want
An
to
event like
interrupt for a
this,
second.
go ahead.
Because
Yeah.
right on point is my significant other who said to me that
Mhm.
when he dies, he wants a roast. He doesn't want people,
I remember
sad.
you
And
saying
he
that.
wants,
Yeah.
right? So I said to him, well, what a shame that you won't hear what they have to say. So for his 70th birthday, I decided to do a roast for him. And people came and sent funny pictures and had funny stories. And that was my goal, so that he would hear those stories and not have to wait.
See, but so you know better. You're a mindful person, and our gears are always around this type of thing.
Yes.
But that's a beautiful, beautiful story, because that's something so important. Guess what? Even though it wasn't a life celebration in the months before, it was something that at that funeral service, everybody's still talking about the roast.
Yes.
Remember the roast and how wonderful it is. And that brings a little bit of closure,
Yes.
and helps the people left behind to come full circle a little bit.
Yes.
So think about this, then you're invited to the funeral. After this life celebration, say Aunt Mary, I use Mary a lot as a reference. And instead of sitting in silence, right, quietly remembering, all of a sudden there are smiles, and
Yes.
everybody's so thankful that we were invited to Aunt Mary's life celebration, and we
Right.
spent 8 hours remembering and celebrating her life well lived.
Yes.
Do you see the difference that that's going to make for the people who got a phone call that Aunt Mary passed?
Yes.
A world of difference. It
Yes.
helps, I believe it helps you grieve in such a different way from all my experiences.
Me too. Me too.
So there are many rich traditions associated with death and dying in Ireland, that are sensitive yet beautifully unfolded. It's almost like they know something a little bit more than we do here. And it's an obsession of sorts. And I read about this and it was amazing. So they go overboard. Go overboard with death notices, with mass cards, with hugs and laughter and handshaking and toasts. And, I learned that the Irish wakes are really the celebration of life, like we help assist people, Lisa and I, with celebration of lives. It's one last party to honor the deceased, basically. And as the family begins to mourn, they would awaken. That's their kind of philosophy, that they begin to mourn, but then awaken. And for this reason, and this was always years and years back, and it's still a big part of Ireland today, less with the funeral homes in place, but they still practice the deceased being waked at home. This is a big thing, and it lasts through the day and the night. Um, so during the wake, loved ones, they gather together, they celebrate, they share stories, they sing, they pray, and they mourn the loss of their loved one. So, and individuals there at the home, they can pray privately when viewing the deceased. They can do it in groups. A lot of Catholics in Ireland, and they do speak the rosary. Usually it's said a few times, and typically it will be said around midnight, right before people start to leave. So guests show their respects by spending time with the family and reflecting on their time with the deceased. They have funeral processions where uh, the family and the townspeople that didn't even know the deceased, they'll walk behind the car as part of the funeral, as part of a funeral rite and a ritual. Um, they're still popular. They're getting a little rarer, I found out, but it's still one of their basic traditions. So the body is laid out in the family's home, and it could be for a number of days, and it could be with neighbors, friends, relatives. And again, I said, and as I read in that book, it's people that didn't even know the deceased because they're coming to celebrate his life and celebrate the family around them who celebrate them.
Right.
It's a comforting
Sure it is.
kind of thing.
Sure it is.
So, death surrounds all of us. And why should it be so painful and scary? And Lisa and I talk a lot about that. People are just afraid, but we are here. We're here for a short time, all of us. So let's have a plan. Because when we do have a plan, it unfolds a little, the whole experience will unfold a little bit differently. And that plan should be directed by us ourselves, right? I've started mine already, just thoughts and ideas rolling around in my head. I wrote a couple of things down, but I'll get to that point. But we all need to do it. So the Duke Global Health Institute, they surveyed more than 1,200 caregivers in different countries, wanting to identify the importance to patients at the end of life. And they included almost 200 palliative care experts across the globe in different countries to grade their country's health systems regarding death and dying. And I found this really interesting, Lisa. The United States the United Kingdom ranked the highest
Well,
in a grade A in doing the best. Ireland did come in second, which was, I kind of expected that. And then there was Taiwan, Australia, South Korea, and Costa Rica. So they all earned that A grade. Out of 81 countries, the United States came in. Ready?
uh-oh.
43rd. That was disheartening.
Horrible.
That was disheartening. So the main conclusion was that most of the people in the world die badly due to either no treatment, in poverty-stricken cultures, or in excessive treatment that
Right.
doesn't cease suffering.
Yes,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
And they also discovered that money doesn't always help people die better either way.
Mm.
Money doesn't have to do with that, really.
That's interesting.
Although this COVID time that we've just been through over 3 years now, I heard this morning on the news.
Well, 2 years, 2020, 2 years, March 2020.
Why did they say we're coming into the third year?
Because the third year will start on March. We all stopped everything on March 12th.
Right.
So we'll start our third year, but it's 2 full years. Yeah.
That's what they said, right?
Yeah.
So even though COVID made it less of a taboo to talk about people dying, right? Now people are speaking about it a little more. We still don't speak about death and as much as we should. And that's the reason for these videos, Lisa, right? To get the ball rolling and to start people thinking and having conversations. And then I saw a video that Our Lady's Hospice in Ireland, they had a public discussion with a whole panel called The Irish Way of Dying. And it was pretty interesting. You can find it on YouTube. And they agreed really that open and honest conversation and communication is a relief to families. And that they found that it's lack of knowledge that can make death and dying a scary process for everybody and cause great confusion. And it's so important for people to pre-plan about how you'd like it all to happen, including down to what music will be played.
Yeah, right? I don't think, my opinion, I don't think it's about the knowledge. I think it's about trying to be honest, communicate, and really be in touch with what life means. And I think people need to start figuring out how to understand preciousness in your life, what's important in your life, and living your life fully, but not having to live it till 100. Okay. Right. But to live it each day. and to make the most of your life. And I don't think it's about knowledge. I think it's about how you live your life, how you look at life, how you understand your life. That's what I think.
But doing all this, doing the pre-planning part and the
Oh,
thinking
absolutely.
about it
Yeah.
and the conversations, it
Yeah.
really, and the choices, and to sit around the table will make a huge impact for
It
everyone,
does.
even the
Absolutely.
dying person,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
To
Yes.
if you need your family are jokesters, sitting around the table and just talking about it. You're going to have one person that wants to their funeral to be completely different than another person's.
Right. Right.
So, have the conversation. So we found that people in Ireland they're very good at laughter. They're very they're very good at helping people heal in a better way after the deceased person is gone. And the wakes that they have at home, really, I read that, and I have never been to Ireland, which I know somebody there now, so I'd like to visit, but it's casual. There's kids in the background running around playing or playing Xbox, there's conversations going on, and life is being celebrated. So they're a little bit more lighthearted, I think,
Yeah.
after all the research I've done. Of course, there's still pain in
Sure.
knowing what's happening. I'm not negating that. But by planning the celebrations beforehand, that especially helps. And I wanted to read a famous Irish prayer that is read at a lot of funerals, okay, in Ireland. And I happen to have that read at my husband's service. And we're not Irish. He's not Irish, but he happened to pass on St. Patrick's Day, and we loved St. Patrick's Day. So it resonated with me to be read that day. And it goes like this: May the road rise up to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sunshine warm upon your face, the rains fall soft upon your fields, and until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand.
It's beautiful.
And that's a famous one. And I
Yes, it
actually
is.
found that on a Christmas ornament. There's a little Irish store here on Long Island in Sayville, and they had that
I
on
know
a
that story.
Christmas ornament.
That's
Yeah,
beautiful. Very
lovely.
beautiful.
It's lovely.
Yeah.
So, Lisa, I
So
know that you had looked into a few
I
different
did, but I want to
countries
mention
as well.
Judaism for a little while, for a second, before I explore some of these other countries, because Judaism
Yes.
has many traditions, of course, and rituals, and one of them is sitting Shiva for 8 days. So during that time period, though people who are family members sit on boxes because they're not supposed to feel comfortable, whatever that's about, people do come and tell stories and talk, and they bring sweet foods because it's sweetness of life, and photo albums are out and children are running around. And so that's the best that I could say for what they're trying to do there. You're not supposed to look, I'm the more religious, you're not supposed to look in the mirror. You put black, you put like sheet on the mirror and stuff, because you shouldn't see yourself at that time. But the point is that there is a celebration during that time of the life and of that person's effect on the family and on the community, and neighbors come to visit and all that. And I thought that was always really nice. That was a really nice thing. And
Yeah.
then there's one more thing.
Lisa, I wish we knew a little bit more. I've never even been
To a
to
Shiva.
sitting Shiva,
Okay.
but from the people that I've talked to along my journey and that have done it, they really, I believe it's a beautiful, beautiful process, and
It is.
it's very sacred and holy, and they
Yeah.
really respect it and hold it like that.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful.
Yes. And then a lot of people after the funeral do a luncheon. I mean, we did luncheons for each of, my parents and of course my husband, because the luncheon, of course, brings everybody together and we talk about, the person and memories and all. And that is our sense of community, though it's not enough. But that is our sense of community at that time. We had a wonderful luncheon for my husband, and I chose the place we got married. I thought,
Wow.
that's just such a perfect place to go back to.
Wow. Yes.
And I
That's
had,
wonderful.
and me, the planner, because I did a pre-need anyway, had at each table a picture of different stages in our lives together. So,
Aw,
yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
You have such good ideas, Lisa.
Thank you. You know, I've been living with death for a long time, and it really is. I tell people all the time, and I don't think they understand. It really is part of living. And if you don't understand that, then you're going to dread it the rest of your life, and you're not going to understand the value of living, or the appreciation of the people in your life. You know, what can I say? I wish that people understood this better. Anyway, I did do research like you, though I didn't go into as detail as you, but it was very interesting because rituals for them, you know, some are religious, of course, and it has to do with the soul and whatever. And of course, you look at the pyramids. I mean, when you think about how they buried all their servants and all their worldly, you know, treasures and everything else right there in that pyramid and that whole thing. And of course, the embalming process. I mean, they did amazing jobs trying to for the afterlife, so that they would have a wonderful afterlife. And that's what they believed in with all these pyramids. But the Hindus, they visit people for 2 days and they chant rhymes and all kinds of stories and stuff. The Native Americans, they take a lock of the person's hair and they apparently hold it over a piece of burning sweetgrass because they believe that it will rise into the heavens. And they have this like community gathering where the deceased family feeds everyone. So that again, they come together, and the adults stay up all night exchanging stories. So that's what Native Americans do. Then there's this something called the Day of the Dead, and that's in Mexico and some of the Central America things. It happens between October 31st and November 2nd every year. And they build colorful altars with flowers and candles and their favorite foods. This goes back like 3,000 years. And they honor everybody who's dead, everybody who's gone. That's the Day of the Dead. The
I like that.
Japanese and Buddhism, Hindu, Shinto, they have steps. They have, you know, certain steps that they do for the deceased: washing lips, washing of the corpse, announcement of the death, a pillow, decorations for the head, the coffin, the daily food offerings. I mean, like on and on, purifying the ground, refreshments for the mourners, the funeral service, the funeral procession, funeral ceremony, the offering of the buried rites. I mean, the burial rites. Each of these things helps people celebrate and helps people come together. That's what the rituals do. There's 49 days of mourning. They visit the grave, they place flowers and all, and then there's short memorial services, actually the 3rd, the 7th, and the 49th day. So that's what they do. In Tibet, listen, this one. In Tibet, the body is actually chopped up into pieces and placed on a mountaintop, so that it's called a sky burial, so that the soul will move on closer to the heavens. And, you know, of course, vultures and all come, but they welcome that because they believe that that soul is moving forward and moving along. I mean, just interesting things. In Balinese, there's a cremation. The cremation itself is an occasion that is supposed to be gay. It's called gaiety. And they liberate the souls of the dead. They put them near wooden bull and dragons, and they do a funeral pyre. You know, of course, you remember the funeral pyres out in the, I guess Hindu does that, out in the water and all, right? And Filipino, there's different ethnic groups there, but they dress the bodies, they sit down in the chair, they put the bodies in a chair and sit them in the chair. They light a cigarette in their mouths. I mean, like, these are really
About that one.
interesting things. Some bury the dead under the kitchen because they feel that the kitchen is their place of nourishment, feeding and nourishment. I mean, you know, what's interesting about all this, oh, and then of course, how could you forget jazz festivals? You know, when you look at New Orleans and you look at a public mourning, and as you said, the street and everybody running down the street playing music and all, the funeral is more of a joyful occasion. It brings everyone together and celebrates. And that's, if we could do anything differently, what I think you and I would like is that people come to terms with nobody's living forever. And we all need to find that sense of celebration of our lives, no matter how long or short they are. And moving on means that is a natural course of events. It is sad. We miss our people. It is not the same. Our lives will never be the same. But we need to do this differently, not dread, not, obsess, all that. I think that we'd all be better for it. And we need to talk and communicate with our family members so that we're all on the same page. People know what we want. People understand. I'm telling you, my significant other has been very clear to me. Do not make me a funeral, he says. I don't want a funeral. That's not what I'm about. I want you to play my favorite songs. I want a backyard party. He's been very clear. And I've been very clear too. My favorite place and where I cremated my husband up in Chittenango Falls, that was our place up in Syracuse. And that's where I took my dog's cremated remains and my two dogs and my cat. I felt like they'd all be together, and for whatever reason. And it was just a very special thing for us. So I think that people need to stop obsessing. Our society is so obsessed with when somebody has a birthday and they say to me, I don't want to tell you my age. And I look at them and I say, you should be proud that you're aging. Other people weren't given that opportunity.
That gift,
and they
right?
look at me. But that's the truth.
One thing I thought of that you didn't mention was Denmark. Supposedly they're big on opening doors and windows, so that the person passing can leave freely. So there's all different kinds of traditions and vigils. I did when I first, about 3 years ago, I was doing a workshop, an in-person workshop at nursing homes, assisted livings, and I talked about different vigils and traditions. And most of these, Lisa, that you mentioned were all included in that workshop. But one thing that I did do that I had seen done is it's a ritual that we can do here. You can do it anywhere. Just because we don't have many at-home wakes here, it can be done if you want it in a funeral home, right? Because the casket's there, it can be an open casket. And I did this in person. I asked for a few volunteers to come up, and I had somebody lay on a massage table, right, with blankets and rose petals. And then there was a bowl of water on the table, for a blessing, and you said a prayer. And then we all held hands. Okay. I saw this done in person before, and that's why I did it at my workshop. And everybody held hands, and one at a time, you'd go around the table and you'd say, I I I bless your heart today. I treasure your heart because you've shown me more love than anybody's ever shown me in my life. Just a sentence. And then the next person will go and choose another part of the body. And they'd say, and I want to honor your feet today, because your feet showed me how strong and what a hard worker you were your whole life. And gave me the incentive and motivation to work just as hard as you. Whatever it may be, something you just make up at the time as you're going around, but you're honoring a life.
Yes.
And I have to tell you, the first time that I saw this done was a workshop I went to in New York City. And I was asked to be one of the volunteers. And I got up on stage and I stood at the end or by her legs or something. And I thought, oh, this is going to be nice. This will be interesting. But I have to tell you, I didn't know these people from a hole in the wall.
Right.
And it was so honoring for me to be able to do that and to take part in that. And as I was speaking, or even though this was fake,
yes,
as I was speaking the words, I start crying. I'm crying because it was just so loving.
emotional. Yeah.
emotional, heartfelt. It was beautiful. It was beautiful. And we spent maybe 15 minutes doing this. That's all it took. And it was just so lovely to see how much the person that had passed was being treasured and honored and loved.
So imagine
Right?
if you knew them. Like imagine if you knew them.
Oh my gosh.
I knew a social worker. She was young. She was maybe 42 years old. She died of leukemia. And I remember going to this little church in, it's like Jamesport, or I don't know, something like that. Really cute little church. And
A
after
little
her,
white church. I
it
took
was white.
I took my marriage, you know how they make you do the thing before you get married?
Yeah,
What is that called?
yeah, your
In
license.
front of, no, where you sit and you talk and
Oh,
right before you get married,
yeah.
we were asked to do that, and we
Uh-huh.
went to the little white church in Jamesport. Isn't
Uh-huh.
that funny?
It's a pre-Cana? What? Pre what?
Yes, something like that, right? Yeah.
Okay. I don't know this stuff. Anyway, so after her husband had spoken about her, she was very, very well known. She was an amazing woman. They asked us to speak about her. And we all got up and spoke about how she had influenced our lives and what she had done for us and how we remembered her and all. And it was wonderful. And so when I did that at my husband's memorial service, somebody got up and did the
Oh,
funniest thing. You have
that
to
is
tell you
so
this. I
great.
have to tell you this because, speaking about people and missing them, whatever else. But the great thing that you remember is the funny things, right? You got to hear this. So my husband was an attorney after an architect. And we used to take kids out all the time in our RV. And that's a liability because if a kid gets hurt or if a kid needs to go to the doctor or whatever, we have this kid with us and we're taking kids all the time, right? So before the kid goes in RV on this trip, he's making them sign this liability. The parents sign a liability waiver
Sure.
and whatever else it's called, right? And we become the medical thing in case we have to take them to the doctor or whatever else, right? So this guy who was very close to our family and the son who was very close to my son gets up and he says, listen, I want to know who signed a liability, certificate to be here today and to speak today on behalf of Fred Strahs-Lorenc. I mean, you know, captured everything about who he was and what he did. And we all laughed and it was wonderful. It was wonderful.
So, Lisa, I love this. And why is it that we can have a church service like this, or even at the wake in a funeral home, and one person speaks? One person, maybe somebody else wrote it, maybe they wrote it, but that's that. And you're not really given that opportunity. And, I'm never going to forget this. I think that's just wonderful that maybe whoever's closest to that person gets up and say, you loved him like I loved him. And I want to know what you loved best about him. So if you'll indulge me and come up one at a time, maybe we can circle the room, and I'd love to hear your story. Now, something as simple as that,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
would make the whole event
Absolutely.
different.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It'd put smiles on people's
It
faces.
does. It does. It does.
And it helps with the grieving process.
It does.
And maybe some
Absolutely.
people can't do it. Some people are so
That's
emotional they
fine.
won't get up out of the chair.
That's fine. But
That's
guess
fine
what?
too.
Guess what? You know what? It just takes a few to say, this is how I remember, this is a story or whatever it is. And you know what? Then other people feel the same kind of liberation and will say, oh yeah, they're talking and it's okay. And I can do that too. Not everybody's
Out
going
of
to feel comfortable.
everything, out of everything we've talked about today, that's my big takeaway. And I think everybody who's listening to this video should incorporate that in their loved ones'
Absolutely.
services, no matter where
Absolutely.
they may be, and watch how the dynamics turn around. It won't be a
Absolutely.
scary, scary
And
grieving process.
my other takeaway is that we need to talk more. We need to communicate our feelings and what we want. Children may feel differently, but we need to speak about what's important to us so that they respect our wishes. Because I want to know that my children are going to do what I've asked. and what I want. And I have
Right.
talked to them about it. And it's important. It's just something for my own peace of mind, to know. And the communication is important. And then, living life to the fullest and precious and all that, and knowing what's important. That's the rest of it. So, yeah. And it's taught us a lot about the United States. I didn't know about how this changed and when it changed with the United States. And the United States did
Very
become more
interesting.
isolating. Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
it
the
makes a
fact that
lot
it
of sense. It makes a lot of sense.
the plague, really changed everything in the United States and stuff. So, yeah, very interesting. So, yeah, this has been a great discussion, and I'm hoping that it's
Has.
helpful to people. They understand, and you and I are also helpful to people. So share
And
some of
if
the things that
you're
you've been
learning
doing.
and if you're learning and getting something out of our videos, please like and share certain videos so that that's the way that it tells us that we know that you're listening, you're watching, and we should keep going,
Yes,
right?
yes. So in our spare
So
time, what do we do? Go ahead, Susan. What do you do in your spare
we've
time?
both written books. They're on Amazon. You can search our names. Uh, EastEndDoulaCare.com has my books and the healing garden that I've put together and my doula services and legacy services as well. And
And in
Lisa?
my spare time, I'd love to be doing more bereavement services, bereavement counseling, not only one-to-one, but I'd love to be in groups, widowers groups or other groups. I think that I can really help people move on. It's a process, and I accept what people go through, and I understand what they go through, but I think I can help them with goals and different activities and all. If you go to lisamovingon@gmail.com, both of my books do support the Lustgarten Foundation. They are about pancreatic cancer, and the last one about moving on is really about looking at the different stages of grief from the beginning all the way through 10 years, because I followed families from the first time that I wrote the first book, which was it was 12 years ago. My husband died 13 years ago, and I started writing this first book almost immediately. I really want to do something, and that's another thing, by the way, doing something, because you feel like you you need to figure out something else. So that was my therapeutic thing. The other, of course, was the online memorial website that we've talked about before. So anyway, I love speaking to people. I love communicating with them, and I love understanding, because we've been there. You and I, we've been there. We know.
Wonderful. And they can reach us at the phone numbers that you see above.
They
But like
certainly
and
can.
share our page again. And
Please,
thank you for coming today. And
please.
we'll see
Thank
you
you.
next week.
Sounds good. Take care. Bye.
Bye, Lisa.